All right, welcome back today with me again. I've been talking about different things about schizophrenia. Been talking about mass psychosis and different things like that. The last two episodes that I recorded were basically on those things. So I know I got to get this all fixed and everything like that. But I'm more interested in dropping the truth and talking about what's actually going on. So again, talking about last time schizophrenia and how schizophrenia was turned into the black disease, the protest disease, or I shouldn't call it disease, the protest disorder. Okay. So the protest disorder back in the 1960s. So prior to that, if you look at the work of Dr. Jonathan Metzl, he was talking about how the different phases of schizophrenia and who was diagnosed with schizophrenia early on in the early stages of them diagnosing schizophrenia. Again, schizophrenia was known as a gifted white man's disease to start out with, and then it went from there. Now it's a protest disease. So if you say anything about if you are under the political banner of black, if you live under the political banner of black, then you are not allowed to talk about your abuse. You're not allowed to talk about the abuse of your people. You're not allowed to discuss race, racism, any of those things. If you start discussing those things and you start talking about your experience and things that are happening to you, then what happens is you're targeted, and they want to get rid of you using that whole thing to say that you are mentally unstable. You're now become mentally unwell to go along in society. So what do they do? Like I said, we have prisons full of people with mental illnesses, and we have no place for them in society. A lot of people who are considered mentally ill are out on the streets. So this is our problem. We're ignoring it, but it's going on a regular basis. It's a regular thing with this where we're ignoring mental illness, but we're not, because police officers who are first responders are going out there, and they are. It's like being in the movie Judge Dredd. Now it seems like we're at that Judge Dredd time where the police officer can be judge, jury, and executioner. So they don't have to ask any questions. As soon as you say this person has some mental problem, mental illness, or anything like that, they can unalive you with no problem. Okay, so remember what happened after the shooting of Sonia Massey, how they went in. This officer went in, and one of the first things he was asking when he was, taking off his equipment and doing all this kind of stuff like that, was, do they have on file some calls on her resident as for some mental illness, because he knows that you can use that as that's the card you can that's the trump card. Okay, you use that mental illness card against any situation, and you're automatically redeemed. You're fine. You're justified. Okay. All right. So today I want to switch it up a little bit. I want to talk about qualified immunity. So we got this thing called qualified immunity. So you see that in the 60s they turned this mental illness thing loose on the people who live under the banner of black, right? Malcolm X was even deemed to be schizophrenic by the CIA, by government officials. Okay, from afar they diagnosed him as schizophrenic. So anybody who speaks like in the way that Malcolm X spoke and different things like that, you are considered mentally ill and mentally unstable. Okay, and so you have to be very careful and present yourself in society in the righteous way, in the right way, where people who know you and people who are around you can say, nah, he got all his, he got all his facilities and all this kind of stuff like that. But if you don't have people around you to vouch for you and stuff like that, they don't want you out in public so that you won't, people won't vouch for you. They do certain things. Let me not get into that, but let me get into qualified immunity, because I want to talk about qualified immunity here, because it's really when I read this off, it's not making sense to me that we're using quote unquote qualified immunity. Um, it does not make sense to me. So let me see. I think I got the same thing open here a couple times. Oh, you're just gonna do that right now, huh, Cat? All right, so I know this is Wikipedia, but this I just looked up qualified immunity. It probably has a decent explanation of this is probably one of the more decent explanations of qualified immunity that I've seen. So again, qualified immunity in the United States, qualified immunity is a legal principle of federal constitutional law that grants government officials performing discretionary functions, that's optional functions, discretionary functions, immunity from lawsuits for damages unless the plaintiff shows that the official violated clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which a reasonable person would have known. Okay, so if you see that right there, a reasonable person, and it also says that it protects this person. Okay, it protects the person from civil. Okay, from lawsuits. So what we're saying, I don't know if I already read that part. Let me see. Performing discretionary. Uh, grants government officials performing discretionary. Okay. All right. Let me see. Let me finish reading this out because it may be in here somewhere. It is comparable to sovereign immunity, though it protects government employees rather than the government itself. It is less strict than absolute immunity by protecting officials who make reasonable but mistaken judgments about open legal questions, extending to all officials, but the plainly incompetent or those who knowingly violate the law. Qualified immunity applies only to government officials in civil litigation. That's what I was waiting on. Not protect the government itself from suits arising from official actions. That's the part I was really wanting to focus on there. That it is protection against civil litigation. So I don't know where we come up to where we get to this place where qualified immunity gives you a license to kill somebody and not face. I said it, unalive. It's too late, but how it gives you the ability to unalive somebody and be criminally uncharged, that you're not facing criminal charges. This law, qualified immunity that we keep on talking about, is not. It's a federal law. It is not about state officials, state government, state police, people who work for local police departments and all this kind of stuff like that, unaliving people. It will you can extend or stretch that law out to say, okay, this person was in a government function, whatnot, and since this person was in a government function, we're going to make sure that they're not sued for trying to do a good job. Now the thought of that whole thing is to save, to help people, and because you got good Samaritan laws, you got all kinds of stuff like that, excuse me, that are out there. But we're throwing it around every time the media throws it around, this term qualified immunity. Somebody who the first person who started talking about qualified immunity, they don't know what they're talking about. It's civil lawsuits that it protects you against, not criminal prosecution. Criminal prosecution is what needs to be done when you're unjustly unaliving people. But not only that, it shows that if you were indeed wrong in your actions and you violated this person's constitutional rights under the understanding of a reasonable person, that you should face also lawsuits and judgments as an individual. Or if you're incompetent, it included the incompetency. So how are we using this as a cover as a umbrella for all officers across the country who are unaliving people. How is that so? That's not that's not the intent of the law. That's not the intent of the law. I just read you the intent of the law. They've taken liberties of people's ignorance. Okay. So if you're ignorant, you don't understand that, then you got some trouble. So here, let me share this piece too. All right. Legal principle of federal constitutional law. In the United States, qualified immunity is a legal principle of federal constitutional law that grants government officials performing discretionary, and this is all optional, the optional functions of your job. Okay, that grants government officials performing discretionary functions immunity from lawsuits for damages unless the plaintiff shows that the official violated clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which a responsible person would have known. That's what it says. What are we doing? We just go and we run with the media, we run with what they say, and everybody's like, oh, he had qualified immunity. That's not what the Constitution says. That's not what the law says. The law says that you're protected as a government official if you mistakenly do something to somebody unintentionally in the carrying out of your duties, and you mistakenly unalive or injure somebody or do something, but it was unintentional. Okay, we have laws like Good Samaritan laws and stuff like that, because if you accidentally, you're trying to help somebody, you're trying to render aid, you're trying to do stuff like that, but you can't seem to save a person. Maybe you broke some ribs, then this happened as you're giving CPR, first aid, CPR, and all this kind of stuff, chest compressions. You broke somebody's ribs, which is normal, right? But the family wants to come and say, hey, once they do an autopsy or something like that on a person that says they have broken ribs, this person gave them broken ribs, they passed away, all this kind of stuff like that, you'll be covered. It was unintentional, right? That wasn't your intention when you were rendering aid. So again, you have this situation that is going on where we are using this, and this is it's crazy that they're hiding behind this thing. Okay, so now I want to talk about the next thing, the connection to this thing. The next thing is, okay, why are we granting this to to federal, I mean not federal, but state and local law enforcement officers when there's clearly a separation? How do they fall under that federal law is my question. They're not federal officers carrying out federal duties. They're carrying out local and state duties. Now, if there's state laws, because this is what they were just saying, this is what it just said, that this is a federal law. That's why all police officers are supposed to be under it. So if you're deputized by the federal government, then okay, but this still gotta be reasonable. It still has to be reasonable, and it's only about lawsuits. It's not about prosecution. You should still be criminally prosecuted for committing a crime. You don't have immunity to that. That's not what it says. Okay? So pick another law, pick another something, but that's not it. We are using that and throwing that around and everything, and I don't know why. I don't understand why. Okay? All right, so this is another thing I came across here. So this is my question. When you have the DOJ, Department of Justice, okay, when they find, as in this article, finds Phoenix Police Department discriminates against minorities and uses excessive force. This is a theme that's been going on all across the country. A Justice Department official said it was the first time the agency found violations of civil and constitutional rights of homeless people. This is on a regular. The Phoenix Police Department uses excessive force violates constitutional rights, particularly to those of homeless people, and discriminates against blacks, Hispanics, and Native American people, according to the results of an investigation by the Justice Department released Thursday. Now, this article was back in no, this is June 13, 2024. This is now. The Justice Department found a pattern of practice of violations, saying Phoenix police frequently stop, detain, and arrest homeless people without reasonable suspicion that they've committed any crime. They don't need to know that you committed, and they don't need articulable, reasonable suspicion or whatever that's called. They don't need that. They don't need to know that you committed a crime. The city and its police department also seize and destroy the property of homeless people without providing adequate notice or fair opportunity to collect their belongings, the Justice Department said. This is from the Justice Department. This is not me. I'm just reading the article. I didn't come up with it. The findings were announced by Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark, who oversees the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. This finding is historic, Clark said. This marks the first time the Justice Department has found violations of civil and constitutional rights of people who are homeless. Finding that's crazy to me that we just now seeing the homeless people are getting their rights violated because nobody represents the homeless people. Those mentally ill people that I was talking about earlier. You see the connection here? This is why. The findings are detailed in a 126-page report issued Thursday. The police department referred requests for comment about the findings to the city. Okay. Now the article goes on, but and talks about the data. Now, this is similar to what we've been seeing. I guess it's the news thing here. Let me see what they're saying here.
Unlike other DOJ investigations of police departments, it wasn't prompted.
Sorry about that.
We're following breaking news out of Arizona, where the Justice Department says the Phoenix Police Department has repeatedly violated the civil rights of residents.
The findings come after a years-long investigation into the city of Phoenix and the city's police force. It was just released today. NBC News correspondent David Noriega is tracking this for us. So, David, what prompted the Justice Department to look closely at the Phoenix Police Department in the first place, and Phoenix, the city? What exactly did they find?
Yeah, so this case was a little bit unusual in that, unlike other DOJ investigations of police departments, it wasn't prompted by any one single incident. Instead, it was prompted by numerous very high-profile misconduct scandals and allegations against the Phoenix Police Department. It did, however, come in the context of the immediate aftermath of the 2020 George Floyd police protests, after which the Phoenix Police Department was accused of unlawfully targeting protesters with prosecutions, with being heavy-handed in its policing of the protests. But again, this involved years worth of allegations against the police department involving all manner of alleged misconduct. Now, what the DOJ found is that the Phoenix Police Department engaged in discriminatory policing against Black, Hispanic, and Native American residents, that they unfairly targeted homeless residents of the city of Phoenix, that they used excessive force, unnecessarily escalated incidents. One thing that stands out to me about this set of findings, guys, that's very interesting and historic, is that this is the first time the DOJ has found a police department to have systematically and unlawfully targeted the city's homeless population. These kinds of investigations into police departments are quite common. The DOJ has been doing them for years. There have been notorious cases against New Orleans, LAPD, Baltimore, et cetera. But this against Phoenix is the first time that the issue of homelessness specifically is in the spotlight like this.
That's certainly a unique finding, David. I imagine we've heard from the city of Phoenix and the Phoenix Police Department. What are they saying?
Nothing yet of too much substance. Both the city and the police department have said that they are going to take some time to review the findings. The city did point out that both the city and the police department gave the DOJ pretty extensive access to conduct its approximately 3-year-long investigation, hosting DOJ investigators to the city 8 times, allowing them to take ride-alongs, giving them pretty much unlimited access to body camera footage, internal documents, things like that. So they were trying to show a willingness to heed the findings and reform the police department. What's not yet determined, this is the big question moving forward, is whether there will be a consent decree in which the federal government monitors and basically oversees reforms, or whether they will allow the police department to pursue these reforms on their own. Guys.
All right, David Noriega on that for us. David, thanks so much.
All right. I mean, there you have it. I mean, there, just like they said, and in that broadcast, that and most people don't feel this unless you're a part of those groups, right? You're a part of those groups under the political umbrella of black. Okay, if you're a part of those groups, black and brown people, and all of this kind of stuff like that, then which is redundant, by the way, I'm brown, so I don't understand when you open a crayon box, I'm actually lighter than the color. But my point is, you have all of this happening across the U.S. They named a few cities right there, but this is happening all across our nation. This is the norm. The only reason why this doesn't happen more in rural communities and things like that, because most of these rural communities are, what do we call that? I can't think of it right now. Memory just goes. But well, most of these communities are one race only, white, under the political umbrella of white. So you don't see that in these communities. I'm still thinking of the things rattling around in my head. Um, what you do to milk? Anyway, so you have all of this stuff going on across the country. You have this misplacement of the law of saying, we have qualified immunity. So you got qualified immunity and injustice that are happening in the same departments that are protecting these same police officers who are acting unjustly. Not by my words, by the Justice Department. So I don't understand. This is me. I'm really trying to understand. So here we go. I mean, it goes on and on. So that's the Department of Justice. Now let's look at this one. All right, excessive or reasonable force by police. Research on law enforcement and racial conflict. Okay, updated reviews of studies and reports that provide insights into law enforcement actions and recent patterns in America. Allegations of use of excessive force by police, the U.S. police departments continue to generate headlines more than 2 decades after 1992 Los Angeles riots brought the issue to mass public attention and spurred some law enforcement reforms. Recent deaths at the hands of police have fueled a lively debate across the nation in recent years. In a number of closely watched cases involving the deaths of young black men, police have been acquitted, generating uproar and concerns about equal justice for all. On Staten Island, New York, the July 2014 death of Eric Garner because of his apparent use of a chokehold by an officer sparked outrage. A month later, Ferguson, Missouri, a fatal shooting of teenager Michael Brown by Officer Darren Wilson ignited protests, and a grand jury's decision not to indict Wilson triggered further unrest. In November, Tamir Rice was shot by police in Cleveland, Ohio. He was 12 years old, out playing with a toy pistol. On April 4th, 2015, Walter Scott was shot by police officers after a routine traffic stop in North Charleston, South Carolina. The same month, Freddie Gray died. I don't know if he just mentioned in that report that South Carolina, one of the cities in South Carolina was one of the cities. And I know he said New Orleans and a few other places. But these are all places. I know North Carolina, Mecklenburg or something, Mecklenburg County, where that police officer got caught on film being recorded saying how he couldn't wait for the race war, he couldn't wait for the riot, all of this kind of stuff, so that he can just slaughter people who are considered black in this country. So we got these people who are policing us, and we're supposed to be policed fairly somehow. I don't know how that's supposed to go. I don't know where is it too late? We can't reform these things. People are talking about getting rid of these institutions, and it's like, well, we need reforms. We need reforms. But how can we reform when we're not really intent on solving the problem? Because it's not the problem that they want to resolve. This is the problem that they caused and they generated. Like I said, 1960s, they dehumanized people by calling them mentally ill. Once they did that dehumanization, then they can move forward with their plan. They dehumanize. When they dehumanize you, they can do whatever they want to do. Okay, so the police in South Carolina case, Michael Slager was charged with murder based on a cell phone video. So he got caught on the cell phone video. In Baltimore, the driver of the police van in which Gray died, Caesar Goodson, was charged with second-degree murder with lesser charges for 5 other officers. There have been no indictments in the earlier cases. All right, so again, all of this stuff, and this is after the DOJ findings across, because they started this DOJ investigation going across the country and seeing how these police officers were doing as far as pulling people over, their encounters with people, all of that kind of stuff it was just happening, pop, 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 happening again and again and again and again. So again, that's what we're looking at. Now, this is my point right here, because this law that's supposed to cover officers, for unaliving people, how are we still covering? How are they still covered by this law? First of all, this law that doesn't qualify anybody to unalive anybody, not in that way. Now, if it's a justified shooting, it's a justified shooting. But we find that right away, some of these shootings we know aren't justified. Now, we argue these things back and forth. Did she throw a pot of water, hot water, all of this kind of stuff? There's always some, they want to be able to argue justice in all of these cases, right? There is no case where everybody is jumping on one side and saying, oh yeah, that's wrong, he shouldn't have done that, and all this kind of stuff. There's always a side of this who makes the argument against prosecution, okay, and saying that it's justified. So this is the last portion of this that I really wanted to bring out. The FBI warned of white supremacy in law enforcement 10 years ago. Has anything changed? Okay, now this is in October. This is published October 2016. So this is a little bit old, but this hasn't changed anything. So the increasing attention towards the killing of black men and women by police throughout the past year has ignited national conversations on racism in law enforcement. Freddie Gray, as we just talked about, Deborah Danner. I mean, you could just go on with all this kind of stuff. An emotionally disturbed woman fatally shot. There's that mental illness again. This week by a NYPD officer. Protests around the country have forced many Americans to reassess how police engage with communities of color. In light of, or perhaps despite, the increased scrutiny, the FBI Director James Comey told police officers at a national conference last Sunday that because of insufficient data on use of force, Americans actually have no idea. Yeah, Americans actually have no idea. Which Americans have no idea, because the people who are being victimized by this, we have an idea. Huh? Have no idea. Americans have no idea actually have no idea whether racially bias is in policing. In policing is really an epidemic, huh? Excuse me, Mr. Comey, but you're not living this. You're not one of us. You cannot say what we're experiencing. You can't. You're not a black man who sits in a car and the police pull up next to you. The police pull up behind you, and all of these kind of things. And you're worried about if I'm going to die on a simple traffic stop. This is happening all across the country. All these diverse places where these people are being unalived should tell us that this is indeed an epidemic. Okay. So, pointing to current public outrage over police killings of African Americans, Comey said the absence of good information and data is aided in growing the belief that police officers target particular communities. Now, his statements is going against the DOJ statements that clearly shows that, and they have done their work, that clearly shows that this is being done. So the lack of data that he's saying is insufficient. That doesn't make any sense of what he's saying as far as that's concerned. Because in the Phoenix case, they had done 3-year investigation on this. 3 years, the investigated officers. We've seen the Facebook posts by all of these secret groups of officers and different things like that. People in white supremacist chat groups who are police officers who find all of these things. So, here, he's talking about the narrative. He told attendees. Now he's talking to police officers, so it makes sense that he would cater to what he was saying, cater his speech to what he's saying. The Association of Police Chiefs is a narrative driven by video images of real misconduct. Now he's calling that real misconduct when it's always argued. So I'm confused. Possible misconduct and perceived misconduct. Okay, all right. So clean that up. But even if there are aren't hard statistics, the problem of racial bias among police isn't new. In fact, there's been concerns of the FBI for at least a decade. Exactly 10 years ago this week, the FBI warned that the potential consequences, including bias, of white supremacist groups infiltrating local and state law enforcement. Okay, now we're getting down to the nitty gritty. Okay, and indicating it was significant. It was a significant threat to national security. In 2006. In the 2006 bulletin, the FBI detailed the threat of white nationalists and skinheads infiltrating police in order to disrupt investigations against fellow members and recruit other supremacists. The bulletin was released during a period of scandal for many law enforcement agencies throughout the country, including a neo-Nazi gang formed by the members of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. I mean, it's proven. We found these groups in the LA County Sheriff Department who harass Black and Latino communities. Similar investigations reveal officers in entire agencies with hate group ties in Illinois, Ohio, and Texas. Now, we know it goes further than that. Much of the bulletin has been redacted, but in it, the FBI had identified white supremacists in law enforcement as a concern because of their access to both restricted areas vulnerable to sabotage and elected officials or people who could be seen as potential targets of violence. The memo also warned of ghost skins, hate group members who don't overtly display their beliefs in order to blend into society and covertly advance white supremacist causes. Oh my gosh. Hit the nail on the head right there. They're everywhere. They're not just in the police department. They're in the court systems. They're in the school systems. They're everywhere with this ideology. And they hide it so that they can continue the white supremacist agenda. Okay. And places like over at Fox News and stuff like that want to deny that it even exists. Okay. At least one white, I mean, you're supposed to deny it. That's the whole thing on there. Okay. At least one white supremacist group has reportedly encouraged ghost skins to seek positions in law enforcement for the capability of alerting skinhead crews of pending investigative action against them. The report read, come on, man. Come on. Come on. Problem with white supremacists in law enforcement has surfaced since that report. In 2014, two Florida officers, including a deputy police chief, were fired after the FBI informant outed them as members of the Ku Klux Klan. It marked the second time within 5 years that the agency uncovered the officers' membership in the KKK. Several agencies nationwide have also launched investigations into personnel who may not be formal hate group members, but face allegations of race-based misconduct. Now, you got to know that these people are being tipped off by the other people, or by those ghost skins in the department, who are tipping them off and letting them know, hey, they starting to investigate. You might want to kill your accounts, all of this stuff. Separate yourself. Make sure you're careful what you're saying on the radio, so forth and so on. Many people in these communities of color feel that they've been the subject of police violence for decades. And when an officer engages in conduct that adds or enhances that divide, they are ultimately jeopardizing the integrity of their agency and putting their fellow officers in danger. Social media has made it easier to expose white supremacists who serve in law enforcement. In September 2015, a North Carolina police officer was fired after a picture of him giving a Nazi salute surface on Facebook. This is what I'm talking about Facebook. They can't put enough of the examples in here about how this thing is going down on social media. Social media has done nothing but feed this more. Bring these people together. Make it easier to recruit people, to bring people in. And as recently as August, the Philadelphia Police Department launched an internal investigation after attendees of a Black Lives Matter rally outside of the Democratic National Convention spotted an officer in charge of crowd control with a tattoo of Nazi Party emblem on his forearm and posted the image on Instagram. You don't have to look far. And I'm not in support of these groups and everything like that who's out there, but these are the people who are handling these situations. If you look into it just a little bit, you'll see the tattoos and all that kind of stuff will tell you, why aren't they doing these investigations, finding these dudes with these racist gang? They can document all of this from prison gangs and stuff like that, but they can't document this from police officers. That they have all these tattoos that tie them to all of these violent and racist gangs. Come on, man. Come on. It's bullcrap. We can clean this up. We don't want to clean it up. That's what I'm saying. And the qualified immunity should not be granted to these folks because they already coming in with twisted states of mind, with twisted intentions. They already coming in to unalive people of color, communities of color, as they call it, or like I say, people under the umbrella of black. They coming in looking for bodies. They coming in looking for bodies. So it's not even that they're coming in looking for nothing. That's what they want. That's what they want to do. That's what they're looking for. So that's the first thing that we should be doing when we're investigating these officers who are unaliving people, is what is their background as far as being tied to alleged hate groups and all that. I'm not going to say alleged because we know they hate groups. To hate groups and all of this. What is their ties? That should be the first part of the investigation. It should be before he even goes out on the job. But it's not, because the people in charge already are down with it or with it. So when your supervisor or your superior officer is on that same thing and he encouraging it, then of course you're not going to get anything like that. That's why the federal government, if you're going to give them cover from a federal law, such as qualified immunity, then you have the responsibility to review and investigate and get rid of these dudes out here. These dudes and these men and women. It's men and women. It's not just men. They looking for bodies. They go in looking for bodies. They not treating people like people, period. When they engage, they always escalating the situation looking for bodies. They're escalating the situations on purpose, looking for bodies. Many people in the communities of colors feel that they have been the subject of violence for decades. That's what I was just saying, said Samuel Jones. That's what I was just talking about, because you can't say anything, Comey, about what we are experiencing and what we are perceiving in our communities. Professor of law at the John Marshall School of Law in Chicago, and when an officer engages in conduct that adds or enhances that divide, they are ultimately jeopardizing the integrity of their agencies and putting their fellow officers in danger. No, they're not, because that's what that's what the people in that department is geared towards. It's like they said, they've been hiring. You talking about 10 years ago, and that study, that whole thing was back in 2016. Imagine where we at now with the recruitment and all of that kind of stuff. So come on now. Policing in America historically had racial implications. We know that. The earliest forms of organized law enforcement in the U.S. can be traced to slave patrols that tracked down escaped slaves, and overseers assigned to guard settler communities from Native Americans. In the centuries since, many law enforcement agencies directly participated in antagonizing communities of color or provided a shield for others who did. But in the 10 years since the FBI's initial warning, little has changed, Jones said. Neither the FBI nor the state nor local law enforcement agencies have established systems for vetting personnel for potential supremacist links. That's what I'm talking about. That task is left primarily to everyday citizens and nonprofit organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center, one of the few that tracks the growing number of hate groups in America. Who is policing this? Who is going in and checking this out? I don't get it. Don't. Okay, we don't. I know we don't. I know we don't. And when I say we, I'm talking about as a country. And when I say we as a country, I'm talking about the majority. We catch them when we can. This is after the fact. This is after somebody has been unalived. This is when they want to catch up to whatever it is that this person has done. It's too late. Somebody has lost their lives waiting for something to be done proactively, not reactively. You have the NAACP who steps in and with the lawsuits and all this kind of stuff. We know Ben Crump is everywhere doing his thing and all this kind of stuff, but that's reactive. Where's the proaction going on in this whole situation to hold people accountable? Where's anybody sending the lawsuits up to the Supreme Court to say, hey, this should not apply to this community, because this community has been proven by the FBI and the DOJ to come in with slanted viewpoints. They're coming in as white supremacists. This is not what I'm saying. This is what's being reported by the FBI and the DOJ. I didn't report this. I didn't say this. Well, I can add my perspective as a person who's been victim to this. Okay, as growing up in LA and dealing with these situations and these officers who come and they deal with you differently than they would deal with a quote unquote white citizen. So where are we going with this? So we catch them when we can, is what they said, which means when we notice someone and check in the database, said Heidi Beerich, director of the Intelligence Project at the Southern Poverty Law Center. The group is responsible for exposing an Alabama officer as a member of a white nationalist hate group, League of the South, after he spoke at their national conference in 2013. The officer was later fired. Huh? He spoke at the conference for the Southern Poverty. I don't get it, but okay. I mean, come on, y'all. This is so crazy. Okay, obviously, we do not want people with white supremacist or other extremist views to be in such positions. So it is important to screen them out. She added, the First Amendment's freedoms of association and expression mean it's perfectly legal for anyone to join a hate group as long as it's for the purpose of legal activity, still be a member of law enforcement. They can even serve in other positions of public office, and they do. But according to the FBI memo, the government can limit employment opportunities of members when their membership would interfere with their duties. Jones says that's problematic. I cannot imagine that the FBI today could issue a report concerning any kind of threat without people being alarmed and wanting immediate action, he said. But in this case, there seems to be almost an acceptance of it. Come on, man. Of course, there's an acceptance of it. Of course, there's an acceptance of it. This country is going along with this. This is a genocide, is what it is. Okay. The thought is it's just ideology, and they have a right to believe this. In response to our inquiry, the FBI said it routinely shares information about potential threats to better enable law enforcement, but does not comment on specific law enforcement bulletins. There are, of course, police officers who recognize racial biases and are calling for change. At the same conference where FBI Director James Comey spoke of the uncertainty of policing bias, the head of the International Association of Chiefs of Police (IACP), Terrence Cunningham, apologized for what he called historical mistreatment of racial minorities. While we obviously cannot change the past, it is clear that we must change the future, he said. For our part, the first step is for law enforcement and the IACP to acknowledge and apologize for the actions of the past and the role that our profession has played in society's historical mistreatment of communities of color. These conversations come as the Department of Justice announced it's launching a national database on use of force and deaths in police custody. For many like Jones, it's another step towards accountability, but questions remain on how to tackle bias early on. One way to do that, he said, would involve screening would-be personnel for bias and supremacist ties, something the FBI acknowledged as a threat a decade before viral videos of police killings became nearly weekly a weekly discussion. The nation continues to examine the role of race in law enforcement. Many, like Jones, question whether scrutiny and infiltration by white supremacists will move beyond the FBI's acknowledgement a decade ago to specific actions in the decades to come. There needs to be more. There needs to more direct enforcement. I think they want to say there needs to be needs to be more direct enforcement. Jones said it's one thing to issue a memo and another to have continued action after there was a warning 10 years ago and nothing else since then. So there isn't anybody working. I'm sure there's small groups, individuals, and all this kind of stuff who's working to make this change, to change this up, to change the narrative and all of this kind of stuff like that. But you know, it doesn't seem like anybody's interested in making this go away. This is definitely a worse problem for people who are considered black uh, in this country than having a whites only anything, whites only bathroom, whites only segregation. Okay, but when you have police officers violating people's constitutional rights and their right to live, right? escalating situations that we clearly see on video. We clearly see these things caught on video and in camera. And there is no concern because we're so used to seeing it by now. We're so used to seeing the images of public lynchings that there is no regard. There is no reaction. Nobody is moving a muscle. The only thing that it does is to continue to terrorize the communities of color. This is that's the point of white supremacy. That's the point of the KKK, to terrorize black communities and communities of color. That's what they are. That's what they are made for, created for, and they're doing it through law enforcement. They're doing it through the government. My own personal, I've taught for about 7 years now, and everywhere I go since I started this criticism of anybody, anything in the system. I criticize anything in the system. Now I'm on a blacklist. So now I can't go to work. I can't do all of these things. I did some things last year. They showed up again. Once you're on the list because you're saying something, because your you're voicing something that's legitimate, all of a sudden you become a target. All of a sudden you become a target. Okay, so if the same thing happens to you, somebody pulls you over, they escalate the situation, and pow, and now they're arguing over and all this kind of stuff like that. Sometimes, come on now, I mean, we've seen this stuff happen unjustly, continues to happen every day. Like I said, I didn't served in this country. I worked, I served in this country for 13 years. In the military, I worked alongside a lot of people who were officers and stuff like that. I even worked with this guy who was involved in a police shooting that didn't unalive somebody, but it almost did. And there was that little 2-year-old in the car, some children in the car. I don't know if it was just a 2-year-old, but there was children in the car. And that officer, since he knew me, asked me if I could vouch for him that he was not a racist. Right? I'm one of the people that he knew, and he's not the only one who's asked me to vouch for him on him being racist. And the funny thing about it is, me working with these guys, and when they came into the military and all of this kind of stuff like that, the one guy who was involved in in that shooting in St. Louis City, the one guy who was involved in that, one of the things he said to me before, because I was going out to be a police officer too, and I worked with a lot of guys, and we were doing security forces stuff on the Air Force side, and a lot of those guys who came from the security forces duty that we were doing I did over 2 years, those guys went into law enforcement. This is one of the guys who went into law enforcement. So I knew these guys before they got into law enforcement, and when they were preparing themselves to go into law enforcement. Okay, and so I knew white guys, black guys who were police officers, the whole nine. I worked with a guy who worked for St. Louis Police Department a long time ago, who had retired. I don't know John. I would say John. I would just call him John. That's all is necessary. But this guy, the first guy I was talking about, this guy who asked me to vet him or vouch for him and his non-racism, one of the first things that he said was he wanted to become a police officer so he can jack people up. He wanted that. He wanted that power to jack people up. That's what he said. And I'm like, dude, like, you want to refer? And then months later, he's up in the news. He's up in the news for this shooting incident. He was a rookie. And then he had to go to he went to another department. All he did was slide over. He got let go from St. Louis, and he had to go to another department. You see, that's the game that is played here. I can fire on somebody. I can do all this stuff. And if I get in some trouble, they're not going to end my career. It's not going to end my career, even though it could have ended this person's existence or some children's existence. I'm just going to be removed from duty because I was a probationary officer. That's what's happening. That qualified immunity? What? And the reason why he started firing was that his partner started firing. That this car that this person was driving up on the curve to get away and around the police officers was somehow a threat, and they needed to be fired upon when it clearly showed that they were out and behind the vehicle in the first place. How is this thing a threat? So he fires, I fire. And that's a justification. That is incompetence. You should know what you're firing at. Just for the sake of innocent bystanders. You're just going to start shooting? And the innocent bystanders in that case were these children who were in the car. So again, the execution, this Judge Dredd type mentality that's out on the streets right now, that's out on the roads, need to stop. And somebody need to, we got the Black Caucus, we got all of these people, but ain't nobody doing anything. We got the Democrats who were in office for the last 4 years now, who've done nothing to address this, but they addressed the Asian hate crime bill and all this kind of stuff like that. But somehow we're still being unalived unfairly, and there is no movement. And as Harris have stated, she ain't doing nothing for black people only. Huh? We can't be protected. We can't be protected from injustice. We got this law, qualified immunity, that's being misused. It's being misused. It's for civil lawsuits only. So when Ben Crump show up, that's supposed to protect that officer against him, not against criminal prosecution. So we need to stop using qualified immunity as anything but a cover for law enforcement officers, the government, period, government officials, period, for unaliving people and violating their civil rights, period. And we see it right from the start with just asking for IDs and going in with no probable cause or anything. So when they go in and there's no probable cause to begin with, when the conversation starts off and they start these going downhill from there, they escalate these situations, violating people's rights right off the bat, then shouldn't there be, that's automatic that he doesn't get qualified immunity, he or she doesn't get qualified immunity immediately. Immediately. It's not there. So let's stop using that as that bogus. It's a bogus excuse. It's a bogus excuse. All right. I've reached my time. I am done with this episode. I'm going to go ahead and end this. So until next time.